We'll call the meeting to order, and I've asked Mr. Hobson to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, number 3, presentations and recognition, foster youth residential housing presentation. Dr. Wilson.
Madam President, members of the governing board, we're very excited tonight to bring to you the work that we've been doing on the residential housing for foster youth. And when we started talking about what this presentation was going to look like, I graphed out and charted out about 5 pages of notes for me to share with you. But then I took Mr. Covington's recommendation to task and decided that it'd be much better if other voices spoke about the good work that we're doing. So what I'd like to do is introduce to you Ms. Caitlin Tejas. Ms. Tejas is an instructor here at our organization that you've seen a number of times when she's come for Students of the Month and different presentations. Caitlin is an outstanding educator, and that is without question. But I think you'll see after you hear from her tonight that she's an outstanding individual and that we're lucky to have her in the organization. So Ms. Tejas, if you'd like to come up to the podium.
Is that on?
Is the mic on? So what button in there?
This one? Hello?
Yeah.
There you are. I'll start off strong.
You are heard.
Hello, Governing School Board. I am Caitlin Tejas. I teach medical assisting here at the main campus. This is my 9th school year this year. Very excited. I am going to get a little bit personal right now, and it's for a very good purpose. My biological name was Celia Luna. I changed my name to Caitlin Lockhart after I was adopted. My adopted parents asked me if I wanted to keep my name or have a new name. I chose to have a new name with my new life. I also chose to no longer speak Spanish at my new house since my adopted dad is white and does not speak Spanish. So I try to learn to read and write English quickly. I did struggle with English for many years. I should have been an IEP student. I just had to do a lot of extra tutoring, and I still make mistakes today. My husband laughs at me. He says, "You're really good with anatomy and physiology terms, but your grammar." So I still do struggle sometimes. My life prior to adoption involved the state of California taking me and my brother away from our biological mother. She had mental illness, and we were living in parks. So my biological mother's illness caused her to, for some reason, not cash in her welfare checks, and my brother and I were getting skinnier and skinnier, so they moved us from her and put us in a foster home. We were placed in a foster home in Chula Vista, California. I loved my foster mom, Senora Luz, but everything else was traumatic. I'm not saying it is traumatic for all foster kids. I don't know the experience of all foster kids. I'm just sharing my story. I experienced sexual abuse, and my brother experienced physical abuse. I slept in a crib until I was 6. There were different kids coming and going. We shared clothes, we shared rooms. I would see parents visiting other kids and remember feeling jealous, wanting parents to visit me. I remember my first toy. I remember my first candy bar. And hiding to eat my first candy bar because for some reason I felt like I didn't deserve it or didn't understand. So I also remember what it was like to feel shame, loneliness, and insecurity. I'm not sharing this story for pity. I'm a pretty strong person, and I'm very proud of myself. But I do share this story to present a perspective of a foster kid. And like I said, I know there's many different stories. I was one of the lucky ones. I was adopted by great parents who offered piano lessons, braces, family trips, and lots of support. Very lucky. There are thousands of kids still in foster care, and many of them have never been adopted by a family. So those feelings I described earlier, shame, loneliness, and insecurity stays with them much longer than it did for me. I did have a lot of insecurities as an adopted kid and still going through them, but it's nothing like what those other foster kids experience that never get adopted. I have learned a lot about foster teams from being a teacher. I've had foster teens in my classroom, and I understand the importance of creating a safe environment with structure. I believe providing structure is a form of love. I feel so much joy when I hear EVIT's construction plans for the foster residency program. The first time I heard Dr. Wilson explaining this project, I felt like crying. This is so needed. Some attention is being given to foster youth. I have volunteered with Foster AZ, Jacob Mission, and Family Promise, but that's really nothing what EVIT is trying to do. What EVIT is doing is huge. Talk about changing lives by loving our students and serving our community. EVIT is for real. EVIT walks the walk. The foster students deserve so much love. Thank you for considering making a difference with this demographic of students. Every student deserves the opportunity to be successful. Kids do not choose to be homeless, abused, neglected, or lonely. But we as a community can choose to help, offer support, resources, and guidance. So I just want to say thank you, EVIT, for considering this project.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having us, Madam President, members of the board. As you can tell, just amazing story behind us and just an awesome project that we get to now follow up on. If you recall, about 6 months ago, we were lucky enough to be onboarded as the design build partner to EVIT. Our team, with Chase Building Team, my name is Vicente Teran. I'm the project director and look after the pre-construction, but along with One Architecture and SPS Plus, had really the opportunity to get ourselves involved in such a powerful initiative in this project that EVIT is engaging on, and just kind of give you a brief overview of where we've been this past 6 months, what we've been working on and where we're headed, and then a short video that's going to kind of give you really good dialogue of what this project has. But since he onboarded us, we went right to work, working with Dr. Doolin, Dr. Wilson. We've been meeting week after week, and it's pretty incredible how quickly our design partner has been able to put together this design to really get us to be able to break ground, as soon as next week on this project, which is remarkable in today's time to build or to really have a design in 6 months. So I'm going to go ahead and roll a quick video for you, and then we'll kind of share you about a little bit the design process and what to expect for construction.
This has truly been a team effort. I have two people from my office, from the design team, Aaron and Kelsey, along with Vicente that just presented the video to you with the contractor. And I have been practicing architecture for quite a few years, doing educational facilities, knowing that as I design buildings that it has an effect on students and staff and people that are educators. This project has taken that another step, because now I realize that we are developing a project that you already have the educational facilities here. Now we're giving these students an opportunity to have a home, someplace to live, where they can grow up here for a couple of years, get their education, and better themselves. And so it's got kind of emotional for me, and even the presentation that you just heard, how it affected someone. So let me see if I can get this to work a little bit. I'm just going to take you briefly through some ideas and a process that we went through. This is your overall campus, and up at the upper right corner, you can see kind of a light blue where it said original housing project. When we started this, that was where we were actually looking at locating this facility, which was just south of the Heritage, where we're doing the Heritage remodel right now. Dr. Doolin came in early on in one of the meetings and said, hey, if we had another site that we could put it on, does anybody have any ideas? Is this really the best site that we could find, or is there another place? I knew, working with Dr. Doolin, that she had some place in mind. And sure enough, she did, and we were actually looking at, well, what about the site that's just west of the bistro? And that's kind of that light green area. And I said, well, I think that might be a good location. Let's see if the building and the facility could actually fit there. And it worked out that it did, and it would front right along Main. The landscaping is already there, the frontage is already developed, and it became a very ideal space for the traditional housing. This is what what's going to look like if you were flying by as an eagle or an airplane. But you can see the bistro on the right, and then our two-story building. It has 8 dwelling units. There are 4 on the first floor and 4 on the second floor, and you probably saw in the video there was a lot of reference to a support building. That support building would house an office for some 24-hour security. It has a meeting room in case there's family or some members that need to come in and actually meet with EVIT and with the students that are living at this facility. Each dwelling unit has a room for 8 occupants in each dwelling unit. So we have 4 on the first floor, 4 on the second floor. So a total of 64 people can live in this facility. We actually went through a couple of iterations of design, looking at some that's already been done, kind of developing some things, and at first we were looking at maybe a 3-bedroom, maybe a 4-bedroom, that the 4-bedroom could house 2 students in each one of the bedrooms. And actually through the input from staff, from Dr. Wilson and Dr. Doolin, and just working with the design team and the contractor, we came up with what we think is a really, really good solution. And it's a dwelling unit, like I mentioned, that can house 8 students. You have 2 bedrooms that can house 2 people in each, so there's 4. And then you have 4 individual bedrooms that are kind of up across the top and that's your total of 8. And if you look at where it says a common room there in the middle, that would be your living room with your kitchen just above that. And it's kind of mirrored on either side. The left side has 1 double room and 2 singles with a bathroom that would support those 4. And on the right hand side you have the same thing. Each one of these spaces will have their own washer, their own dryers. They have a little study room. They have restrooms where they can have a sink to themselves. So each one, you don't have 4 or 8 people sharing 1 or 2 sinks. They each can have their own sink. And so some of the spaces, as you saw in the video, the kitchen area that's to the left, up above at the upper right is kind of looking across the living room into the kitchen, and then the lower right is just one of the vanities that would have two sinks, and you'd have 2 more on the opposite side there at each one of these dwelling units. The second floor, because we have a roof that's over that area, we can actually vault the ceiling. And so you can see the beams that would give us some volume. and vault that area. So this will be on the second floor. So 4 dwelling units would all have this feeling up on the second floor. We're able to do that because of the structure that's there. Now I'm going to let Vicente just go through a schedule and some staging that he'll be using.
Awesome, thank you, Don. So real quick, construction-wise, what to expect. A pending item on the board agenda tonight is that GMP for this project. With your approval, we would be moving into construction as soon as the following week and really hit the ground running. So from now until about September, you can expect a lot of site work, underground utilities going in, and then from there it's going to be all about the structure and that envelope through the rest of the year to really get what we call weatherized. And then into the spring is going to be finishing up the interiors, making sure the kitchens go in, the bathrooms, those rooms really get built out, and wrapping up that site work to be ready sometime around this time next year, June of 2024, for the first residents in the fall of 24. And then just a brief overview of our construction area, as Don mentioned. In that northeast corner is really going to be our site area, and then we're going to have some of that staging and parking, some material storage also just south of that heritage area. We're going to be using a lot of the egress on the far west side entry of the campus now off Main. And with that, we'll open the floor for any questions.
So, Madam President, members of the governing board, as a reminder, this is a project that we've been working on for a number of years, really. The dollars allocated to us from the governor's budget 2 years ago, the $10 million, the ability to have space so that aging foster youth who have not finished high school, who do not have a GED, who do not have a career pathway can come in a place that's safe and allow them to get some of the services and support that they're going to need in order to transition into an opportunity that's better than what they have now. As you can tell that from Ms. Tejas' story and the stories that I know some of you have heard, the need to have a space like this that's safe, that allows individuals to grow into being something maybe more than what they ever thought they could be, is desperately needed. There's a ton of work that we have to do programmatically in terms of what does it look like in a day for the individuals, and we're in the process of doing that. But we also know that by statute, we need to have information back to the legislature by 2025. And so the need to get the facility up and running as we continue to build out what the program looks like is of importance and is necessary. And so with that, we'd be happy to answer questions or concerns that you might have on the presentation tonight.
I'd like to ask Caitlin a couple questions, if I could. Yes, sir. Okay. One thing you said is that you appreciate, I don't know, I could say rules, but guidance.
Structure.
Structure, okay,
Yes.
structure. Hopefully you're setting up for structure for positive for all these kids. I think the idea is extremely great, okay? They also said in the presentation, they're kind of semi-structures going that you have in your mind?
Yes. From a teacher's perspective, the foster kids I've had come in my classroom, they appreciate security. So when I say structure, it means they understand what's coming up. They understand and they know what the environment is going to be. They're comfortable in the environment, and that they are willing to not just be a foster kid, to be a student, to grow, to develop, to be something more. So in my classroom, structure for all kids, but especially foster kids, is a sense of security, and it really shows them what love is. I have kids, students that are not foster kids, let's say some of my homeless students I've had in my classroom. That structure, the security, the understanding what's going to happen, the consistency of life is something they love and crave. That's what they want. A lot of these foster kids, they move from home to home. They've been to many schools. They switch districts. They You know, I've had students where, Miss, I don't have my books because they're at the other house, or I stayed with someone else, I don't have my backpack. So, you know, there's been times where I've had notebooks, pens and pencils, I've even had extra food, extra bus passes. You know, having a sense of security is very important. I do want to share a quick story, if that's okay.
Please.
I have two fun stories. This one story is my daughter had a friend who was a foster kid. He outgrew the foster program, but he was still in high school. So he turned 18. He got moved to a group home in Phoenix his senior year. And I asked my daughter, I was like, how's your friend doing? How's he doing? She goes, well, I can't really get a hold of him. He's somewhere else now. He has a new phone. He wanted to go to EVIT for the fire science program, but you know, he didn't have a way to get there. So he's somewhere in Phoenix. And I said, oh. And I was talking to some other teachers about it, and they said, well, he's 18. He needs to figure out transportation. There's a bus system, there's a light rail, there's really no excuse. And I thought about it and I said, okay, I understand that as a parent of, I have an 18 and 19-year-old, I understand that thought process, but my 18 and 19-year-old have me. They have a good support group. They don't have multiple changes happening all the time. Not to mention this particular student had an IEP. So for me, this is providing support, security, providing a stable environment so the students can get the right resources, help, and guidance to be able to take those next few steps. Because right now, we don't really know where he's at. He's somewhere in Phoenix. Another positive story is my homeless child, my homeless student. Sorry, you teacher, you know. So my homeless student was homeless when he was 16, was in my classroom. His mom had a drug problem, and he was in my 4-hour-a-day class. And I was talking to my coworker about him the other day. She was like, oh, have you heard from him? And I said, well, he got his bachelor's degree at ASU. He got accepted into the master's degree program for genetic counseling. He's doing fantastic. She goes, remember he used to run with us? Because he did. When he would come to school, it wasn't just coming to school for the class. He would come to school to run with the teachers to exercise. He would come to the school to come in my classroom and eat lunch. He would want to sit and talk after class. He wanted to participate in any Saturday clinic, after school clinic, whatever he could do to be here. Because this was more of a home than what he really had. And I'll never forget the day when he got accepted at ASU. He came back to visit me and he's like, Miss, I want you to know, I have permanent residency. And I was like, you do? And he said, ASU dorm. And it was a very happy moment. So I believe in providing structure, and that is a positive thing. I do believe there is love in providing structure, and I think this is a great example.
Okay, my other question for you is, you keep talking about security, and in that housing that you pointed out, that would be a place for the security people. Would you rather have security people there or a couple? Because you said you like your mom and dad and everything to do. Can we get a mom and dad persons in there instead of just security? What's your opinion?
I think both. The mom and dad idea is fantastic for inside support. Teens need, I mean, the mom and dad that's going to be there's not really a mom and dad, but they're going to need as much support. The security for the outside is just, you know, the neighborhood. So I would say both, but I tend to always want to give more. So I don't know if I'm the right person to ask that question.
Okay, thank you. Any others? Just me. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mr. Lee.
In general.
You have your mic on?
Thank you. Does new site, I know this is backed up right onto Main Street. And most of our, that stretch of Main Street between roughly Extension and Dobson is not one of the nicer places in Mesa. In fact, that's probably one of the highest crime areas in our whole city. And I'm concerned about backing that facility up. You got light traffic 24/7, light rail, sirens and ambulances coming up and down all hours of the night and day. If we're gonna site it there, have we taken some thought into buffering from there? You know, people coming onto the property, we've had problems in their easement with people camping out there.
So I think
It's,
those are,
there's just a myriad of problems and I'll be quiet in just a moment. That I think, you know, the campus as a whole is set back and we have the parking lot area as a buffer. But now we put these vulnerable individuals right there.
so Mr. Lane, you bring up a question that we wrestled with quite a bit, to be honest with you, in terms of the location. I think part of what the design gives and does is that when you look at it, obviously, the design face, the backside of it is essentially just a brick and mortar where all the living happens in
Well, there'll
in the
be
front.
windows and fire exits and so on, but.
The second piece to it is that, and we didn't show this here because it's not part of this project, but is the idea of having the security. And I know we've talked about security, whether it's mom and dad, whether it's security officers, but security also comes in the form of different things like cameras, different things like how we allow entrance and exit to the space itself. One of the reasons why we opted to move it back was because as we talked with individuals who have more experience in the foster space, one of their concerns about where we had it located first was these are individuals that are going to be 18, 19, 20 years old, and the idea of putting them smack in the middle of a high school in some ways wasn't conducive to
Yeah.
who they were in terms of their maturation. So the hope was is that we could find a space that allowed the students the opportunity to be treated like young men and women, because they are, but still be in a relatively safe, confined space, but then utilize aspects of security that we talked about and that we'll come back again and show that allow us to provide a sense of security for those individuals. Truth of the matter is that if you had it there or next to Heritage, the sirens that you hear are the sirens that you're gonna hear.
Yeah, I get it, but I'm just concerned of, that might make someone who has a propensity to wander a little bit, make it easier for them, or perhaps other people coming onto our campus. And I'm sure there's some way to do some kind of passive barriers there.
Looks like we have campus security and safety on the
There's a
agenda
fence in there.
next.
Yeah, well,
There's what?
That's
fence.
gonna,
So there's a wall that's there, and there's gonna be some fencing that is there. And again, the fencing isn't designed it's designed to protect, but also not to make folks feel like they're
In a prison.
correct. And so, part of the balance, I'll be honest with you, is that the population that we're leaning in to serve is unique in that a good portion of their entire life, they have not been afforded the opportunity to be treated as if they mattered the way that we want them to matter. Yet we do want to protect them. And so
Yeah.
how do we create space and an environment that treats them the way we would want our own kids to be treated, but does provide a sense of safety and security? And I think through the design build in terms of the location that it was set on, in terms of the back facing the main street, some of the safety features, some of the fencing, some of the monitoring that will happen there, I think we're as apt to provide as safe of environment there as it would be if it was, the 20 yards up behind the Heritage.
yeah, I'm not saying it's wrong, I just want to
Fair.
make sure we took it in consideration. Because it's gonna take, there's gonna be no one solution as far as
Correct.
security. You're gonna need mentoring for
Multiple.
these people.
100%.
You're gonna have, 64 kids, you're gonna need a lot of mentors for these kids.
That's a ton of mentors.
Since it's out there by Briscoe, the
Bistro.
Bistro, excuse me, food, will they get passes to use that facility out there?
So remember, that facility is open to the public.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're still working on is there's a balance, because part of growing into kind of that adulthood is getting the support that Ms. Taya has described, getting the nurturing that Ms. Taya has described, the education that she described, but also making sure that we're building in the ability for them to recognize what budgeting is, as an example. So can they eat there? Absolutely. Can we do that at a reduced cost? Absolutely. But there's still going to be a cost associated with it.
Okay, will the schooling be year-round?
So, yes, short answer to that is.
Since we changed to year-round, I guess.
Because they're gonna, yes, short answer to that is yes. And part of what we're still working to unpack, and like I said, with the programmatically, we'll come back again and describe. But one of the things that we've come to realize is that every single one of the individuals is gonna be on a uniquely different path. Some of the individuals that come to us may only be 8 credits short from getting their high school diploma, and they would much rather enroll in Heritage and finish in a traditional high school. Some may be 15, 20, 17 credits short, and a GED is better for them. All of them will be required to take programming through the CTE, through EVIT, but we recognize that there may be some that need a little bit of time before that happens, that need a little bit of support through some of the work through the mentoring, some of the work through the counseling that they need to get underneath their feet before they can take on the opportunity. And so the short answer is yes, it's going to be year-round. That doesn't necessarily mean that all students will be taking classes year-round. It'll be based on the need that the student has.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Mr. Boyle, you go ahead,
Oh,
please.
no,
After you.
feels silly starting. Mine's more of a comment, but just want to say thank you to Ms. Tejas for sharing your story. It is, I think, really inspirational and underscores just, I think, how transformative this can be for a community that we can really support. So thank you for that.
So, Madam Chairman, Dr. Wilson, it sort of mirrors some of the comments that have already been made, except it's not clear to me that we've interwoven that in with the architectural stuff. Seems to me that counseling is going to be a really critical part of this, 24-hour counseling, and I sort of didn't see the space or the interfacing part of that with respect to counselors on site. And then the same point about security and how security is done is going to be tricky, because I mean these aren't armed guards, but and there in fact may be some sort of interface between security and counseling, but putting 64 kids there without supervision 24/7 is going to be I mean that's the critical. The facility looks fabulous, but the critical part of the program, it seems to me, is that sort of human services side of it. And I assume, I'm stories out of school, I'm sure, I assume you guys are deep into those discussions already, so.
So we are, and honestly, I think that as wonderfully beautiful as this building is, to your point, that's really what's going to make the program uniquely different. And part of what we are doing is working with other agencies who have experience in the foster space and getting a sense of some of the support that is needed. And as I said to Mr. Covington, it's going to be almost an individualized approach. And so counseling is going to be heavily a part of it. Mentoring is going to be heavily a part of it. Work-based learning is going to be heavily a part of it. Health and human services is going to be heavily a part of it. And you have some of the spaces within the individual room, the units, but that extra lodging area will have space that can be utilized as well. But one of the things that we're really grateful for, because of who we are, is that these individuals have the ability also to have access to some of the space that we have on our campuses, some of the space that we have already in existence. And so that's what makes us uniquely different, I think, than some of the other endeavors, is that it isn't just a building. It's a building connected to an amazing school that has resources they can lean in and support. It's a facility that's connected to Adelante Healthcare that has mental health experts, housed there 24 hours a day. So yes, and as we talk about the programming, we'll come back again and share a little bit more about that.
And I want to thank all of you for your presentation. It's still really inspiring to me. Really excited about this.
Last thing, Madam President, members of the Governing Board, I would like to thank the Governing Board for their support. Ms. Boggs had this idea and this discussion multiple years ago, and it's been an effort that we have leaned into. over the course of time, and most districts would not have the courage to do something like this, but there never has once been a no. There's always been suggestions on how to get better, and I think that's partly what makes us who we are, is to have a board that truly believes in doing what's in the best interest of students. So thank you for your leadership and stewardship in a project like this. I don't know that it could have happened elsewhere, so thank you.
Okay.
Could I ask one final?
Oh, God.
This is a real, so 64 slots, what is the need?
So the need, I mean, if you just look at the statistics, that, you know, we're talking about the aging out foster youth, and we know that only about 33% of foster youth complete high school, about 1,200 age out each year. So if you just say that, you know, what is that, 800-ish across the state of Arizona that potentially have the same sort of need.
Right.
And part of our belief is that if we can figure out a way to make a difference, is there now the potential for a blueprint that allows this to not just be here.
Yeah.
And so the need is much greater than what we can provide.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'll just leave it at that. The need is much greater than what we can provide, but I'm appreciative that we're trying to figure out a solution that has not yet been presented in a systemic sort of way.
Okay, thank you.
Will we be presenting this to our legislators since we were giving them money?
Yes, so it's really interesting because when we talked about, you know, how, we wanted you guys to see it first, obviously. But we also know that there's benefit in having others see it. The tough part is that it's June in Phoenix and July in Phoenix, and there's not a lot. And so we wanted to get in front of you first, hopefully have the opportunity to get the GMP approved so Chase can get to work, and then sit back and say, where else can we show this? Where else can we talk about this? Because this is something that we need to show and talk about. So absolutely, Ms. Boggs.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I just remember one other question. We don't have any athletic facilities on here, and I noticed in the budget there for it, they were gonna have athletics, some kind of,
Yeah.
there's programs out there that you're gonna put in? Like-
So, well, one of the things that, you know, as we've looked about the space, one of the things that we want is for the students that reside there to have the opportunity to go out and play hoops or, you know, do something that's physically engaging, not just sit in their room or you know, go around the community. So there is the proposal of having a ball court that's there and some field space that's there. Part of the renovation and remodeling that we're doing with Chase across the campus is going to create some of that opportunity as well. So, yeah. The idea is to give some space there for those students.
You put in a pool table or ping pong tables, they'll play it.
What a lacrosse field.
Yeah.
Yeah, listen.
Let's put a football stadium up.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right. B, campus security and safety.
Madam President, members of the Governing Board, Dr. Doolan is going to give us an update on our campus security.
In the future of it.
Madam President, members of the board, thank you for this opportunity to kind of give you an update of where we are in security. And part of this will wrap into the foster as well, because many of the things that we're implementing are across the system, not just in the foster care area, and it kind of mimics each other. So when we talk about safety on a school campus, of course, we always think of the big things like active shooter or those kinds of tragic events that can occur. And while that's important, what we've learned here at EVIT over the last little bit is we have some security issues that have occurred on a daily basis that needed to be addressed because they tend to be more common and frequent. And to do that, we tried to be a little more creative in how we were looking at our security and what we needed to do as we went through the construction process. So one of the changes that we have done over this last year as we've been looking at security is one of the first things we did was partner with Mesa PD. I don't know if you know this, but the Mesa PD really loves coming to the bistro. And we realized frequently how many police officers were at our bistro. So we reached out to Mesa PD and asked them if we could strike a deal. And the deal is that we give the police officers an extremely discounted lunch for their presence on our campus. So the Mesa PD has agreed, and they come to us frequently, almost daily, that the bistro is open. And the deal is when they come for their reduced lunch, that they patrol our campus. So you'll frequently see the PD either parked, doing their paperwork in our parking lot, or patrolling as they come in and out. And part of that is just to increase the visibility. That was some of the recommendations we got, is that when you're on EVIT campus, the visibility of security as well as police on the campus. So that was one of the minor things we did. Another thing we looked at was security changes. Previously, our security guards were patrolling in golf carts or a car, and they were largely just patrolling the exterior of the campus, really watching who was coming on and going off. But it came to light that we have security issues within the campus. Not all security problems happen from someone who's just coming on that shouldn't be here. Sometimes it's people who are supposed to be here that are some of the security issues. So one of the things we looked at is changing the way that we are patrolling, and that included asking one security guard to always be in the parking lot, but then to have the others not just patrolling the outside, but actually getting out of their vehicle, walking through the environments, being seen by students, and easily recognizable as security. Again, that visualization to decrease the need for security. One of the other changes we made is we're hiring additional security guards, but the additional security guards we are hiring are going to be bike security guards. What we want is someone who can be anywhere within campus in a quick second, and bikes are the easiest ways to do that, and then they would be easily identified. And we're looking at some part-time security guards that then can be inside the campus and patrolling the different buildings, because as you know, we have several buildings on campus. So having that additional help will be greatly needed. One other thing we looked at was bus duty. Bus duty at EVIT has always rotated, meaning that you do bus duty for a week, and then you're not on bus duty again for 6 months. Part of the problem of that is you don't get to know the students, you don't know who's supposed to be where, and you don't notice the faces because they're all brand new to you because you don't know them, you aren't on the same spot. So our bus duty for this next year is moving to the same person every day. So we are looking at some of our support staff will be assigned to bus duty as well as security, so that there's that familiarity with who is coming and going on the campus, who should be getting on the bus and off the bus, so that we have some consistency on the campus with the eyes that are watching. And then lastly this is a big one, is construction. So the construction, as we're going through the construction, we're looking at areas that we had some security. So we discovered that theft is a real issue for us at EVIT. This last year has brought that to light. So one of the things that we worked with is cameras. We're improving the cameras, and as we redo each building, we're installing more cameras. We're also getting away from keys and going to a badging process for the doors, so that it can be recorded who's coming and going. So instead of everybody having a key and we don't know who's coming on Saturday at 6 a.m., we will actually have badges that they have to badge in and out to open the door, and that will let us know who's in the building and who's out of the building, and will be easier to track those people who are coming and going if we were to have an incident. Secondly, when we look at those cameras, we're looking at some of the storage space. We've discovered that our tools, largely this has been discovered down in the industrial trades, the tools, the equipment, the copper wiring seem to disappear. To make sure we're good patrons of taxpayer money and the equipment that we're buying, as we redo these areas, the storage rooms are no longer enclosed, meaning they will all be visible from the main areas with a chain linked, I'm gonna call it chain linked, but it looks better than that fence, in front of it, so that the instructor can visualize the place where the tools are, and there's also a camera present, so that we can see who is taking the tools in and out, hopefully to decrease the theft that we've been experiencing on the campus. The other thing is we're looking to change our culture. And one of the big culture changes we're looking at is empowering our teachers and staff to ask students, do you have a pass? And it's not just students, it's any visitors that are on our campus. To really ask those questions. Can I help you? Do you have a pass? What we learned by doing this towards the end of this last school year is we were not consistent with that. In fact, many times we would have groups of students or visitors on campus with no identifiers at all. So we are changing that culture, and passes will be mandatory. And we are asking all of those who are about our instructional specialists, our administrators, our security, our staff support at the desks. If you're walking from one building to another and you encounter someone, you greet them, you say hello, you ask if you can help them, and do you have a pass if it's not visible on them. All visitors should be having the EVIT pass. If it's a student, they should have a pass with them that says where they're going and where they came from. So those are some of the minor areas that we're looking at. Another area we have been discussing, and we're going out for an RFPQ, RFQ, I think that's it, right? To get a consultant to come in to really look at our plan for at the higher level of safety. And that includes our evacuation and where we evacuate. Some of the standards have changed. It used to be lockdown, hide. Now it's run, fight, hide. It's changed, which means EVIT needs to update with it. But in order to do that, we have to go out to competitive bid, because it's going to be an expense. And so we're putting that together to go out for that competitive bid. But we also need some of the construction finalized, because as we're changing things within the remodel, it changes our exits, where the cameras are, changes the way that we would develop a plan. So all of that has to be kind of brought together, and we are going to bring in, the thought is to bring in, with your approval, an outside consultant to look at that final plan and to see if we are on the right track. Any questions for me?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Will the passes be given to board members?
Yeah, board members should always check in when you are on campus.
But I usually do.
You should set the example. Just
we should-
like I
we should have a pass
tell
like-
Dr. Wilson that he needs his badge when he's walking around campus.
Yeah, true story.
True
Did you
story?
update your picture
Okay,
on
and my
that?
other question is, couldn't you get the Mesa police officers just to come for donuts?
Listen, they serve our community. We are all about serving our community. So we are happy to have them on our campus.
I have a question.
Yes.
Will any of these security personnel be armed?
At this time, none of the security will be armed. However, I do
Zero?
believe we're looking into, I know that there's a grant and there's some funds available for us to get an SRO, and we are applying for that. However, I'm gonna be transparent, there's not enough police officers. So the concern is, even though we might have the money to be able, the funding to get an SRO on campus, does Mesa PD have an SRO to spare?
Couple of questions as well. I'm assuming that with all of the construction and the renovations, we'll make sure that Mesa PD has all of the updated blueprints, internal, external, for everything.
Yeah.
Cool. And then it is, I think, of concern that there are problems with theft and obviously other security concerns short of an active shooter. What has the magnitude of theft been over, let's say, the past year or so?
So I think that's a hard one to answer, because I don't know of all the theft. I know that we have had some theft. The theft I'm specifically talking about, that it was student generated, actually was students who told us, which, they told on other students. And then as we looked into it deeper, we were able to realize that that was part of concerns with not having the equipment they needed. It was because the equipment was walking out. And they were selling it. They openly shared that.
And I think some of the theft that we experienced this past year too was through, in my opinion, through a third-party provider that was doing work for us. And what we've chosen to do, because you all have agreed to increase some of that base compensation, is to move that third-party provider's services in-house, so that we have a better idea of who's actually working with us and for us, in an effort to try to reduce some of that as well.
Yeah, and so it sounds like some of those internal, for lack of a better word, security concerns have significant overlap with discipline, right? With,
Correct.
Academic discipline. To what extent have there been significant internal security concerns that would go beyond typical discipline, or that would have involved, Mesa PD charges, et cetera?
I think if we would contact Mesa PD if we had the ability to do so. I guess if we had enough information, to do so.
And we have contacted
And we
Mesa
have.
PD on several occasions. In some cases, Mesa PD has chosen, they've been great partners, but they've chosen not to, in some cases they have as well. Oftentimes too, what we found in some situations is that it's ultimately up to the individual that might have been impacted by the event as to whether or not they wanted to pursue that, and whether they did or they didn't is sometimes independent of what we would want to have happen.
But I think one of the biggest takeaways, if I can, I mean, we jokingly talk about Mr. Covington needing a pass when he comes on campus, but truly, you do. That is one of the things that we need to change the culture around here, is really knowing who's coming and going. It's a large campus, and we have to make sure that the visitors that are coming on our campus are stopping by one of the front desks and checking in and do have a pass and are supposed to be here.
Yep.
Yes.
It's, I'm sorry, Mr. Lane, go ahead.
Oh, I can wait. Go ahead.
So quick question, with all the architectural stuff we're doing, are we also worrying about lockdown security with respect to doors and rooms and stuff? I mean, I was watching a television thing recently about the importance of having, classrooms that can't be breached.
Yeah, all of the classrooms will lock, and, well, like I was saying earlier, as we move through the campus, we're moving to the non-keyed, so they're badged, so you would have to actually have a badge to badge in.
But to the extent that,
We can override
there's
that and lock
an
it.
active shooter here, everybody huddle back here.
Correct. But this is why we want to bring the expert in, because the huddling in the corner is actually not the preferred method anymore.
I was just thinking about secure places that.
It's knowing the exits, so as we build, we're looking at where are the multiple exits. So if you're in one building and the shooter's on this side, how do I get out of the building the other way?
Okay.
Lots to take in. That's why
Yeah.
we need an expert.
All right.
Wow.
Comment I had to make, I recall when I first came here, there were a lot of cameras in use, but they were being abused by some staff and being used punitively. And that was a big issue. So we need to make sure that it's all out, everybody knows, and there's not just somebody's harassing employees with the
Correct.
cameras. And that was happening here, and that was a problem. And, we just don't want to make sure, hate to see us go backwards. I don't doubt the cameras are efficient and effective, but they shouldn't all terminate in one person's office and that person abuse that access.
Correct. I mean, that was part of the challenge when I first came, that same sort of culture in which the idea that it was used not necessarily just to identify potential safety issues, but to identify individuals, professionals that we organizationally maybe wanted to take issue with. And so to your point, it won't be one person, it'll be accessed by a number of individuals, and the cameras won't be used for, going after employees. It'll be used for making sure that we know who's on our campus when they're on our campus. And as we've seen, our parking lot will have accidents in, and having the camera ability to know who's at fault. I mean, all those pieces have merit as long as we don't spin it so that it becomes a tool by the administration in a negative way towards staff.
I'm in no ways advocating that we don't have cameras. I realize we have to.
Just use them.
Just the way they're utilized and who has access to use that and for what reasons needs to be
Agreed.
looked at very closely.
Very good. Thank you, Dr.
Okay.
Dillon.
Thank you, Dr. Dillon.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to number 4. I need approval for the regular minutes from May 8th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
I'll move we approve the minutes from the regular meeting held on May 8, 2023.
Is there a second?
Mr.
I'll
Covington.
second.
Oh, Mr. Watkins.
Okay. Any discussion on this?
Mr. Watkins did. I believe he didn't.
Yeah, he did. Mr.
Discussion.
Watkins did.
Yeah, but is there any discussion on the minutes?
No.
No.
Everybody good? Okay, I'm going to call for the vote. Hobson?
Aye.
Watkins?
Aye.
Did she say me?
Yes.
Yes, aye.
Covington?
Aye.
Lane?
Aye.
Boyle?
Aye.
Boggs is an aye. Okay, motion carries. Number 5, call to the public. Do we have anybody?
No, ma'am, we don't.
It's your chance.
Number 6,
Consent agenda.
consent agenda items.
I would like to approve the agenda item A,
A,
which means you can talk, but I'd like to also talk about M. Do that one separately, please.
so we want to pull item M for discussion.
Yes. The only discussion I have on it is in the 2004 year, they approved caps and gowns for completion. And I don't think that should be a fundraising activity for anybody. If we could just delete that one and, you know, just like we correct our minutes, just delete that one and everything else is okay with me.
So, Madam President,
Dr.
members of the governing board, that, we absolutely can do that. That wasn't utilized as a fundraiser. It was a placeholder back in 2004 that has just carried on. It hasn't been utilized by the organization since I've been the superintendent, but to Mr. Covington's point, I think removing that out because it doesn't make sense, just makes sense.
Okay, do we need to do anything with that?
So the motion will just be to correct them and that's it,
Okay,
to approve all the agenda items.
all right, so A is to vote on consent agenda,
I'll
which
second.
includes all of them, every item on the consent. We have a second?
I seconded.
Any more discussion? No? Okay. Hobson?
Aye.
Watkins?
Aye.
Covington?
Aye.
Lane?
Aye.
Boyle?
Aye.
Boggs is an aye. Moving on to personnel. A, Dr. Wilson?
Madam President, members of the governing board, there's nothing here that isn't out of normal personnel agenda item.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
I will move to approve personnel, but I think we should combine A and B, 7A and B.
I'll second that.
Okay. So the motion is to approve A and B in personnel. First and seconded. Is there any discussion? All
I
right,
second it.
okay. Call for a vote. Hobson?
Aye.
Watkins?
Aye.
Covington?
Aye.
Lane?
Aye.
Boyle?
Aye.
Boggs is an aye. 8, information and discussion possibility of adding special events liquor license to facility.
Madam President, members of the governing board, this is just a discussion item. We didn't want to pursue it any farther without kind of getting a sense from the governing board. Currently, our board policy doesn't allow there to be liquor sold or utilized at an event that is held on our campus. It's my understanding, and Director of Legal Services, you can correct me, but by statute, that opportunity does exist. And the reason why it's coming to you is that we've had a number of organizations over the years that would like to rent our banquet room out. But part of their function would carry with it either the consumption or sale of alcohol. Clearly, our students can't be a part of that. Clearly, our culinary instructors couldn't be a part of that. But in every situation, what it was is an outside agency, outside group that wanted to just rent the space and then would get it catered independently of us. So it just became kind of a banquet hall. Most recently, this came to us by Pipeline Worldwide. If you remember, Pipeline Worldwide is an organization that we partnered with 2 years ago to build that Battle of the Boxes, that Connex container in which we helped build a livable space for doctors in Uganda. And, you know, so this organization yearly has fundraisers and are very big supporters of EVIT and the work that we do and would like to bring their partners on our campus, but the fundraiser does carry with it a dinner and alcohol. And by now, as it stands now, we can't do that unless we do a policy change. I don't know, counselors, or anything else I mixed? So I just need a little bit of direction. Would you like me to pursue this a little bit more? Is this not something that you're interested in as a board? Just a little feedback so we can.
I know Mesa Chamber of Commerce does their Taste of Mesa, and they've wanted to use the facility for that, bringing the different restaurants in, using and they
Yeah,
haven't, because that's part of what the business
does.
community wants
Yeah.
to have, so, I don't know. I don't have an issue with it as long as we don't have students and they don't leave the liquor lingering take it
Well,
with you.
And I mean, we could go so far as, and correct me if I'm wrong, Counselor, of even having some sort of a limit, 2-ticket per, and of course but I mean, there's some parameters that we can put in too, if so inclined, but currently we just can't do anything.
The biggest concern I'd have would be liability.
That was what I was gonna say
You
too.
know, I don't know how you escape all the liability that brings.
Someone goes out and has an accident or something like that?
That, or falls and face plants somewhere, or there's an assault, or some,
Do we need to look
something
into
like
that?
that. Anything, alcohol tends to bring out the worst in people.
Not always.
Wouldn't that be on
It
the
brings out the best.
people that are providing the alcohol? Wouldn't they be the ones that are responsible, or should be?
They should be liable.
Correct. We can craft an indemnity
Yeah.
agreement.
That
a
would be
hold
part of the
harmless agreement that
contract.
will protect
That'd have
us.
to be, almost.
And they would need. if they-
Airtight.
We'll work on, yeah, we'll make it airtight. They would have to be a 501c3, they have to be a charitable organization, and then they would have to get a special use permit from the city of Mesa to begin with. And then they would have to bring in their own servers. Obviously, we can't be serving alcohol, and those companies typically have their own liability policies.
Are there any other K-12 school districts similarly situated who have a policy in place?
Yes, there are.
Oh, okay.
I cheat all the time. I go on the ASBA's website.
Okay,
and search
and see
for them.
who's got it?
Some of them do. 'Cause
Okay.
that was my first question, is anybody else doing it? So,
Right.
yeah, there are other school districts.
Yeah,
that
I'm
allow it.
cool being on the leading edge of supporting foster students. Finding alcohol in facilities, it's nice to know that there's some company.
Just to let you know, I worked at a parochial school years ago, and I was a coach, so they like to have the regional conferences meet for athletes of the year at our school, because we had beer on the refrigerator on campus. So, yes.
Should you have?
Not the other one.
And this is a bit down the road, and I understand that, but, we currently are a secondary institution. We're working towards becoming a post-secondary institution in addition to that. And so some of the things that we potentially will lean into, just as an organization, are gonna be uniquely different than what you're gonna find probably in any other just K-12 or 9 through 12 sort of institution. Not that that means that we should, but I'm just saying we're gonna have a bit of a different presence than a typical high school or K-12 district will have. So are we okay with pursuing, I'll have Director of Legal Services craft an airtight liability policy that we can bring back to you? And again, at that point in time, if that's not something the governing board's comfortable with, I'm okay with that. I just didn't want us to get too far into the weeds if it was just something you weren't interested in. So thank you, I appreciate that.
I would be interested to know who is leading the way in that charge,
I'll get a list.
if you could share that.
And I'll contact their attorney to steal their indemnity agreement.
See if they've had issues or have their,
We also, after football games, serve liquor.
Madam President, item B, as you can tell, and we've talked before, that our campus is under renovation, much needed renovation. The next phase of renovation is the fire science building, which is on the other end of the campus, and this building is gonna be under renovation. So here in the next bit of time, we're gonna bring plans to you for this space, because you live in this space as well, so that you have a sense and a voice on what this space will look like. But pretty quickly here, this is no longer gonna be able to be used as a governing board room during renovation. And so we don't have to decide tonight, but in our next meeting on the 26th, we'll still be in this space. But shortly after that, we probably won't be. And so the question becomes, where do we want to house our governing board meetings? Do we want to move to Building 1 on the main campus here? We certainly can do that. The most conducive space, just in terms of the logistics of the usage, is over at Power in the skybox space that we used before, although that may not be necessarily the most easily convenient space. And then also the question of, do we want to try to limit some of the normal activities that we do in our board meetings? So as an example, we have Students of the Month every single month, which is the highlight in many ways every single month. But depending on where we wind up having our board meetings from July through conceivably January, do we want to limit some of those so that we don't have as much and a space that needs to get filled. So you don't have to answer tonight, but I just ask you to be thinking on it, so when we come back on the 26th, we can have a little bit of definitive on where we're gonna set our meetings moving forward, because obviously we're gonna have to post those and notify the, the website in our community that the location is gonna change.
I see two places. We can go to the auditorium, or we can have it in the culinary area.
Culinary, we put, potentially, culinary is scheduled to, in about March. So assuming that we get building 3 done before then that's a possibility. I didn't think about that, but that might be a possibility. Assuming that this building is done before culinary goes under construction. So I can look at that and talk to Chase about the timeline. That might not be bad. And then building 1, we can certainly use as well. Building 14 has an auditorium in it, although the logistics of getting that up and running would be a bit cumbersome. So there are some options, but I'll take a look at culinary. That I hadn't thought about. That might not be a bad one. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Item C, Director of Legal Services, new policy manual, first read.
We've been working on this new policy manual for quite some time. But before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about the old manual. There it is all its glory. It was created more than 35 years ago, the original draft, and then 35 years ago, the language they incorporated into policies is not what the language we use today. When I started practicing law, there was a lot of archaic language they put in things that they tried to teach us not to use. They'd never revised the manual to get rid of any of that archaic language. It's designed for manual updates.
Well, it's called a manual.
So you would just get new pages to just substitute them in. It wasn't designed for electronic communication. 1 policy per page, so it started out at 1,100 pages when I first got here. We previously reduced it to 717 pages just by reformatting and taking out of the white spaces out of it. And it's not written for CTED, it's written generally for public K through 12. So there's a lot of policies that were included in there that we don't really need. So we took them out. There were 160,948 words in that manual.
Wow.
And many of them were not necessary. So here's the process we went through. I rewrote and reorganized the existing policy for clarity and conciseness. And then I parceled it out to other staff members for their review, because I know how to write what the policy said, but I don't know whether it really functions the way it's supposed to function in the real world. So Dr. Wilson took the first step out. He reviewed the entire policy and gave his feedback, and then we farmed it out to multiple senior staff for their review. Our chief academic officer took the sections on student and instruction, chief operations officer did support services, chief financial officer, the business office portion, the director of information systems did all the IT policies, public information officer reviewed the community section, and the HR director reviewed, our new HR director reviewed the personnel section. So all of those people, I'm grateful to for their review, because they found a lot of the things that were mistakes that I wouldn't want you to have found. So that was helpful. Then I compared the new policy manual to the crisis manual, the catalog, and the faculty resource and operation guide to make sure that they were all consistent. So this is what we consider when we're making the changes. We're 1 EVIT, so we wanted it to be the same policy for the high school, the adult program, the AA programs. We are not a traditional high school, so we eliminated the policies for programs, activities, and issues unrelated to CTEDs. We wanted it to be easy to navigate, read, and update, and we wanted it to align with what we were actually doing, the systems that were in place. So we replaced a lot of paper forms of process with electronic versions, because it's much easier to handle. How does the new policy compare to the old? Well, it's 460 pages shorter than the most recent version. It was once 2 3-inch binders, now it's 1/2 inch document, which my assistant here will pass out how she would like. There's 63,000 fewer words, 40% less reading. Nothing was left out, however, though we eliminated a lot of the verbiage. It's more readable, there's no more legalese or needless wordiness, it's more relevant, and there's no policy assigned grades K through 12 or activities that we don't have. So how did we do that? We put more than 1 page on a policy and used both sides of the paper. We reworded the policies. Here's a couple of examples. We deleted everywhere it said it shall be the policy of the board that, because why else would it be in the policy manual? And we deleted things like member of the school staff and replaced it with staff. Members of the governing board became board members. That eliminates a lot of words. I'm repeating myself here. We deleted policies that don't relate to CTEDs. We deleted statements making abiding a policy a condition of employment because that's already in the employment contracts. We don't have to tell them that again. With respect to board action, we deleted within budget or at a duly noticed public meeting because those are statutory requirements. There's no other way for you to do that. So we don't need to reiterate a lot of statutes. And we deleted policies including duties of third parties. There are actually policies in that require the Department of Ed to do things, which I'm sure they're not reading it, and I'm sure they don't care that we have it in there. What else did we do? We took out all the forms and put them on the internet. They're easier to access by the staff. We'd make sure that people are all using the same form, and they're much easier to update that way. We combined policies. There used to be separate policies for vacation, for sick leave, for different categories of employment. Now there's one policy for vacation or sick leave, and then the categories are underneath it. It's much easier to navigate that way, and it's much clearer because when we hire people from outside to come in, and it says certificated professional support staff, most of them don't know what those categories mean. So if they want to know what their vacation schedule is, they can just go to the part that says vacation and look it up. It's much easier. I got rid of redundant policies. There was, throughout the policies, were duties assigned to the superintendent. They're all over the place. We moved them all into one section for the superintendent's duties, so Dr. Wilson will know exactly what he's responsible for, and then he can delegate it to other people. I said that a lot. I should have deleted that from the slide. I had a policy in there called EIEIO, which I had thrown in to see if anyone was actually reading the policies, and if you looked it up, you would find it was just the lyrics to Old MacDonald's Farm. But at the end, it would invited them to contact me. Since May of 2020, when I put that in, only 24 people actually read it and emailed me. 21 employees, 1 applicant, 1 parent, and Susan Siegel was the last one to find it just a couple weeks ago. So I'm not going to be testing anybody that way. Here's an example of how you clean up a policy. This is the current policy CB. It begins this way: the board shall employ superintendent. Well, you can read that. The new policy, which is in chapter 3, section 2B, repeats that. The next part of the policy, though, it's tacked on with that, and then this last paragraph becomes one sentence.
Wow.
It means exactly the same thing. The original policy, 111 words. The new policy, 46 words, without losing anything.
Nice.
This is when you do appellate work in the Ninth Circuit, there's a word limit, so you learn how to use as few words as humanly possible. Very challenging. So how can you track the changes? You're going to get a copy of the policy manual and a cross-reference table. The cross-reference table has a column called old policy. There's the lettering system from the old policy with the name of the old policy, and then the next column under, there's none appears in the old policy, means it's a new policy. The new policy column shows where the policy is in the new policy manual and any substantive changes that were made. If the policy was just reworded, that column is going to be blank. So just assume that we didn't do the red line version to compare the two because it's just been a giant pile of red ink. Here are the caveats. The cross-reference table may not be 100% accurate because 700 pages to cross-reference. The new policy manual is checked for spelling and grammar, but some typos go undetected by spell check because they're still words. No spelling or grammar errors would be shocking.
Is that your disclaimer, huh?
And the new policy will undoubtedly need to be tweaked. So as we go through this in the next couple of months, people will point out more mistakes. So how can you propose changes? Under the current policy, this is the first read at the first meeting. The second meeting is presented again for discussion, so you can come back. You get 2 weeks to read it. You can come back and tell us what you think needs to be changed, and we can incorporate those changes immediately. We don't have to bring it back for a third read. So that, and questions?
Have you copyrighted this work?
I did put a copyright notice on it, and today I looked up what the process was to get it copyrighted with the Copyright Office, and it's a little bit cumbersome, and then as I was thinking about it, I thought, is it really worth doing? Are we, if anybody wants to steal our policies, are we gonna deny them that?
No.
And-
Well,
and-
yes,
and
the
the-
VA made us think about their copy.
The
well,
copyright.
They made us think about it, but I don't think they really had a copyright in, because most of the language in the policies come right out of
Public
statutes.
domain, yeah.
And they only have a protected interest in their expression of the idea. So these are, the ideas in the policy are not protected, only the way we've said it, so they could do what I did, and just reword everything.
Thank you. More than that, shouldn't this be the kind of thing we'd want to share with other CTEDs?
Correct.
Yes.
Well, when you say share, we can sell it to Westman.
No, but I think part of one of the things that we have said as an institution, since we all work together, is that EVIT needs to take a more proactive role in trying to help shepherd some of the discussions across the state. And so, you know, we're no different than the other CTEDs in that they're functioning under the old format, and if we can help lean in and support and provide some assistance, we'd be happy to do that.
And what's ASBA gonna say about this now? Never mind.
Nothing, we canceled them.
Yeah, no, but
Can't say anything.
We
you don't
we
think,
can-
you don't think they're gonna hear
I
about
just
it?
want to let you know
Canceled ASPA.
that my first month that I was on the board, they gave me that policy thing, both binders, take home and read it. And I read all of it and went through it.
I'm anticipating that you're gonna read all of this as well and take
Yeah.
joy in pointing out all of my errors.
You know I do that. No, I'm not gonna try to. I will. No, I'm just kidding. But, the one thing I found in there is I just retired. I needed insurance. I found out I could get insurance, so it was worth reading.
Yeah.
Through the district, yeah.
Are there any other questions? Thank you.
We
for
need
this
more cowbell?
opportunity.
I could have used a little more cowbell.
That's right. Thank you.
The old superintendent's nickname for me was Cowbell.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
And that's all we have for information and discussion, Madam President.
All right. Okay, oops, where am I at now? Oh, we are going to 9, action items, GMP contract, foster youth residential housing.
Madam President, members of the governing board, we are at a point in the foster youth housing in which we are here to present to you the GMP for the residential build. And with that, I'd like to ask Vicente, if you'd like to come up and speak to the GMP.
Yeah, absolutely. Madam President, members of the board, thank you so much for having us again up here tonight. So in front of you is the guaranteed maximum price, a single guaranteed maximum price for the EVIT foster housing project that you saw before you today. So it'd be our intent with your award tonight to be able to move into the construction phase and take the next 12 months, really June to June, to be able to complete this project. And we'd be happy to have you guys out to walk the site or kind of see the progress as we go along. But if there's any questions, I'm certainly here to answer them.
I'm
I
excited.
just want to know what athletic equipment you're gonna buy. Don't worry about it. 11A.
Good. Any comments? Thank you. I'm excited. I can't wait. I've been waiting for a long time for that. All right, so it's an action item. I need a motion to
I'll
approve.
move that we approve the 9A, the GMP contract for foster youth housing, residential housing.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Watkins?
All right. Any discussion? Have we talked about it? Talked about it? Talked about it? All right, let's vote. Hobson.
Aye.
Watkins.
Aye.
Covington.
Aye.
Lane.
Aye.
Boyle.
Aye.
Boggs is an aye. Motion carried. The budget proposal for fiscal year 2023-24. That would be Ms. Perez.
Yes, ma'am.
Spend $9 million just like that.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board. Quick update on the budget here for fiscal year 23-24. Just want to give you a quick overview about the process, what to expect.
Today, you're approving the proposed, it is the recommendation to approve the proposed budget. After that proposal, we will be adding it on our website because we do have to post it for 10 days prior to the board adopting it. So you will be having this on the agenda during the next meeting, again, to officially adopt the budget for the new year. Then in October, you will be reviewing and approving the annual financial report for the current year that ends through June 30th. After that, depending upon what our enrollment is, we may have to come back and do a budget revision in December. And again, we won't know that until we're closer to that time frame. Then May of 2024, that's when you go in and do any final budget revisions for the fiscal year. So the proposed budget that you're seeing today and the one that you will be adopting in 2 weeks, obviously it's not going to be the final because it goes through many rounds before it's finalized. Then again, we go through the same process next June with the proposal and the adopted budget. Budget highlights for the fiscal year 24 is the 2.92% increase to the base level. Also a 9.38 increase to the district additional assistance, which is our funds that we receive for capital. For those of you that are newer to the board, every year we do make a conservative effort in our recommendation, especially because we do not know what our enrollment will be like in next year. So given that it's based on that, we do always propose about a 5 or a 6% decline from the current year, and this year is no different. That is what the budget that you're reviewing is. That's the recommendation. It's a 5% decrease over fiscal year 23. Just gave you a little bit of a history. In the last 3 years, we've done a very similar allocation in that we expect a decline, but it's been very favorable in that we've received an increase, with the exception of fiscal year 21, that we had a slight decline there. In fiscal for the budget, this includes what the board approved earlier in the fiscal year regarding salary increases, which includes up to 14% for the certified staff and 4% for the classified staff and administrators. It also includes, because we are required to publicize the average teacher salary, it includes the average for fiscal year 24, which is about $67,595, and I gave you just the history for the last couple of years. Please note that average salary does not include any performance-based compensation that our instructors receive through the 301 plan. Budget formula, I just wanted to show you here. Base level amount, $4,914. Again, what we are proposing with that decline of ADM being $8,362, when you do add that CTED support, gives you that 11,000 ADM times the base level amount and what our budget capacity is with the additional district assistance. Our total equalization base is 61 million. Out of that, the 61 million, 13 million is out of our tax base, and our county and state equalization is the remaining 48 million. M&O expenditures, just give you here a little breakdown of how it goes into our salary and benefits. As you can see, the majority of that, it goes into the other, which is primarily the pass-through funds that go into our satellite districts, which is that 34 million or close to. Again, this number will vary once we know what the true enrollment is, even at our satellite campuses. Our classroom site fund, that is the projected revenue based on our current enrollment, and what that covers is the 20% for base pay. Historically, as you may recall, 10% of the instructor base pay was paid out of the classroom site fund. This year, you approved the additional 10% to be funded out of that. In addition to that will be the performance-based plan that will be brought to you in the fall for approval. And then along with that is the menu of services that's also part of that 301 plan.
unrestricted capital outlay. It's basically our capital, and that's our current balance, which will include anything from equipment, technology, our textbooks, our curriculum, our vehicles, anything related to capital, as well as our rent and construction. Federal and state projects, these are a quick summary of those that we have with the different federal projects that did decrease just simply because over the last few years we had received a lot of COVID-related federal funds, which are obviously no longer coming in. We also have state projects, and then any of the other funds is basically all other funds within the district. Any questions? No? Thank you.
Ms. President, if I could just for 1 second, I'm sorry, can you speed back to where it showed the average salary? So, Madam President, members of the governing board, again, I think when you look at this, this is a tribute to the work that you all have done. Since fiscal year '22, the average salary has gone from 59-ish to this past year, 67. I'm not so sure that there are other public institutions that have been willing to put the kind of dollars behind our faculty and staff that you have. Part of what we struggle with over the course of time is being able to attract and retain qualified staff. That's been a real issue for us. You have given us the leverage to attack and tackle some of that. So sometimes you all vote on things and we all move on and life goes. I just think it's important that you recognize the good work you've done to make sure our faculty and staff are being compensated at a rate that keeps us competitive. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, Ms. President.
I have a question, quick question. It's not in here. Do you still reserve for you guys the ability to pay those extra sums for the extraordinary, hires that we may need to have?
Yeah, Mr. Hobson, yes, part of the discussion we had when we did that compensation analysis was exactly to your point, the ability for us to still have the opportunity to provide a hard-to-fill signing dollars, so that if we have an individual that, the salary schedule puts it at X amount, but the individual won't come for anything less than 2,000 differential, are we authorized? And to answer your question, yes, very much so.
And this compares, by the way, the average compares very favorably with where we were just 2 years ago. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I need a motion to approve the budget proposal.
I vote that we approve the budget program for 23-24.
Proposal. Is there a second?
Proposal. It says budget proposal right there.
Is there a second?
Second.
Right. Any discussion? All right, let's call for a vote. Hobson?
Aye.
Watkins?
Aye.
Covington?
Aye.
Lane?
Aye.
Boyle?
Aye.
Boggs is an aye. Motion carried. Number 10, executive session. I need a motion to approve us going into executive session
So
for
moved.
legal advice. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Call for a vote. Hobson?
Aye.
Watkins?
Aye.
Covington?
Aye.
Lane?
Aye.
Boyle?
Aye.
Boggs is an aye.
And we'll go into the fishbowl if you all want to
There's
take maybe a
there's
5-minute
an
break.
issue,
I up again?
You're gonna be, huh?
We're waiting for what's coming.
I'm up next. You can pass those out.
Yeah, okay. All right, we are back. Let's move on to 11, information and discussion, a report on fire science schedule and hours.
Madam President, board members, I was asked to review the fire science program schedule for fiscal year 2021, 2022, and compare it to the timesheets for the same period. Previously, as part of a investigation of Kevin Johnston's grievances, he was one of the fire science instructors. I reviewed that and reviewed Robert Johnson's EOC charge. He was also in the fire science department, and the statement of charge against Barry Clark. In that process, I interviewed Barry Clark, Chuck Herman, James McNamara, Kevin Johnston, Dr. Wilson, Dr. Doolin, Laura Cook, and Angela Jones. So I got a full array of viewpoints and facts about what was going on in the fire science program. I also reviewed all of Kevin Johnston's emails and met with him, Dr. Wilson, Dr. Doolin, and Edith Perez regarding his grievance. The results of the prior investigation was that Barry Clark and Kevin Johnston, they didn't like being questioned about the schedule that they were working under. They didn't like the new program director's management style, and they didn't understand the chain of command, and they were not willing to follow the administration's directions. So there was a rift there. They tried to portray it as some kind of hostile work environment, but in terms of legal claims, hostile work environment is a specific term of art that refers to sexual harassment, not that your boss is being a jerk and you don't like the way they treat you. So there was no claim there. And Kevin Johnston in particular thought he was on an equal footing with administrators, and when we had the meeting with him about his grievance, he characterized it as a negotiation, that he was on equal footing with us and he could tell us how things were going to be. And when things were not going the way he liked, he said, I have personal relationships out there in the community.
Excuse me, before we go too far, can you let me know what his official title was?
His contract, he's an instructor.
Okay, cool, thank you.
And so he said he had personal relationships with the community that he could exploit for the benefit of the students, but if we weren't going to do things the way he wanted them done, he wasn't going to do that. The investigation only revealed that the fire science staff didn't like the new program director, and they didn't want to do what she asked. And what she was asking was, give us a staffing schedule. The result that Kevin Johnson agreed this all at the superintendent level, and at that point he could have brought it to the board, and he declined to do so. He didn't take it the next step. No other fire science staff member submitted a grievance to the program director, to the chief academic officer, or to the superintendent. Robert Johnson's EOC charge, he was claiming he was being discriminated against. What really happened in that case was he had a disability, and he was seeking disability benefits from the fire department he used to work for. And if you're employed, you can't get your disability benefits because it shows you can work. So he didn't quit because of anything going on here. He quit so he could get his disability benefits. So there was nothing there. Barry Clark, we brought a statement of charges regarding him to you in November. He had an opportunity to challenge those charges. He could have come before you and told his side of the story and explained why what we were doing was wrong. He didn't. He accepted the termination. And later on we found out, when I went through all his emails, he had actually drafted his resume in July before any of this happened, and he was already looking at a job in Alaska, which is where he moved to. So for fiscal year 21-22, Barry Clark recently provided 2 calendars. One is the curriculum calendar, and one is what he called the assistant staffing calendar. And if you look at the first page in your handout there, those are the months for each file, when the file was created, when it was last modified, and when it was last printed. And you'll see by the dates they were created, he never made a calendar for the entire year. He was making it on the fly, almost on a month-by-month basis, with the exception of the month of April. There never was a staffing schedule for that year at the beginning of the year. The author of all those calendar pages is Anna. I have no idea who Anna is. There was never an employee in the fire department, in the fire science program named Anna. There's nobody. I had Carlos search the system, Barry's H drive on his server, and all the emails to find the calendar. It's not on our system. Doesn't exist. It was never shared with the program director. We never saw it before it was delivered to us recently. What I learned from the interviews was that what they were doing was scheduling on the fly. They were working around the schedules they had for the other jobs. So every month, until they got their fire department schedule, they didn't have a staffing schedule. They were staffing around the fire department schedule. And the problem with that is the curriculum schedule then, there's particular people have to be there to teach those lessons. So when they didn't show up because they had another job, they flipped the curriculum schedule. So none of the schedules that were provided were followed. Kevin Johnson and Chris Robeson were hired because they couldn't find one instructor to do full-time. What they were supposed to be doing was sharing the instructor role. They were never supposed to be there on the same day. And one of them was supposed to be there every day. And if you look at the highlights on the calendar, starting on the second page, the names in black are the ones that were scheduled. If there's a line through them, that means they didn't show up when they were scheduled. If their name is in red, that means they showed up when they weren't scheduled. And the ones highlighted in yellow, that's when Chris and Kevin were both scheduled to be here, or were both actually both actually here. That is not what they were hired to do. One of the complaints Kevin Johnson, what he said was, well, sometimes when we're both here, one of us was instructing and one of us was doing other things. Well, the other things they were doing is not what they were hired to do, but they were still clocking in as instructors and getting instructor pay. And when we confronted Mr. Johnson, said, you don't get paid to be an instructor unless you're instructing, he got angry about that and said, well, then I'm not going to do it. Of the 159 days that Barry Clark provided a staffing schedule, only 55 of those days did the staff that was scheduled actually show up and clock in. 65% of the time, the staff that showed up didn't match the schedule. 77 of the 159 days, Kevin and Chris were scheduled to work together or actually work together, and that number should have been 0. 23 of the 159 days, neither one of them showed up. That number should have been 159. The problem with all this is there was no way to know from the administration's standpoint who was on campus and who wasn't on campus, which provides a safety concern. But one of the other real problems is our board policy. I can find where I wrote that down. It's our board policy GCR, employee's position in the district shall be given precedence over any type of outside work. Employees are free to carry out outside work as long as the outside work does not interfere with the employee's performance of district assigned duties. There was no way for them to make a year-long calendar and follow the district policy, because so what they were doing was accommodating the outside work, which is absolutely a violation of board policy. It's not the way it should have been done. For fiscal year 22-23 is when they started pressing Barry for a schedule. He didn't have one. He started to create one in October, middle of October, for October and November. It was just a curriculum schedule. He still didn't do a staffing schedule. And then, of course, he was gone in November. So there was never a schedule for 22-23. Any reports to the contrary are not true. So the conclusion was, for fiscal year 21-22 and 22-23, the Fire Science 2 program did not have any set schedule for staffing or curriculum. The schedules were changed monthly to accommodate outside employment, and Johnston and Robeson did not cover instructions as they were hired to do.
Question? When did Kevin and Barry start working here at EVIT? What year?
2020.
In 2020?
Well, Kevin did. I'm not sure when Barry started.
Do we know when Barry started working here?
I think Barry. Hello. I believe Mr. Clark's first year here was my first year as the assistant superintendent, so 5 years ago, I believe.
Okay. So when did the new supervisor, whoever, was it Laura, correct?
So,
When
Ms.
did
Cork,
Ms.
became the
Cork?
supervisor, this year, so school year 22-23.
So just this year?
Just this year, yes.
So for 4 years, somebody else oversaw that program?
Yeah, somebody else other than Ms. Cork.
Okay. Do you guys have any comments or questions or anything
Yeah,
before I?
something you said,
dive into
Madam
this?
Chairman. Go ahead, Mr. Boyle, sorry.
Oh,
You go.
So, something you said just, and maybe I'm just being distracted, but did I understand that there were occasions when there were neither instructor was there for as aspects of a curriculum for which they were hired, and that there were occasions when the instructor who was hired for a piece of that curriculum was not there instead of the other one who was not hired for that?
Correct, and on those days, they would bring in there were other fire science instructors, because there's Fire Science 1 and Fire Science 2, so when none of the Fire Science 2 instructors were there, they would just cover with one of the Fire Science 1 instructors.
Does that mean that there were graduating students that didn't really get the full
I don't believe that's the case, no, I think they would combine the classes so that all the kids would get hours.
So, okay.
But I do think the point that you raised, Mr. Hobson, I believe the students, I do believe the students got the opportunity to learn the content and the material. But I think the challenge with it is that when you have an institutional situation in which educators don't show up and we have other teachers cover for them, either they did that on their own, which is negligence, or it was done with the understanding of administration. Either way, it is not condoned or supported by the organization itself. You as a governing board would never say, hey, if they show up, great. If not, then have somebody else cover for the first 20 minutes. That isn't how we operationalize the organization, yet somehow that did occur. And no other staff in the institution has the latitude or the luxury to do that.
Right.
Do we have the potential to have this same issue in any other of our programs?
This same issue,
Well, similar issues.
I think that there is, short answer is I think we're always going to have issues potentially in which there is either lack of oversight by the institution and the administration and or individuals that have become so accustomed to being able to do what they want, when they want, and how they want, that it raises the possibility of something like this.
Any other comments?
I know you've mentioned that a good number of these folks aren't working here anymore. What else are we doing to ensure this isn't going to happen again?
So I think that's a perfect question. So I think part of what helped bridge the gap is that about halfway through the last school year, Dr. Doolin actually assumed responsibility of the program in order to try to get the train back on the tracks. Next year, we'll have a new director that is over the program that we will be able to work with in a way that allows there to be the continuation of the good work that Dr. Doolin has done. I also think that the nature of the individuals that are in the program now as instructors are individuals that I have confidence in aren't going to look for ways. I think this situation presents kind of a negative side of what happens organizationally at times in which you have staff that begins to kind of run the show and an administration that doesn't, that allows it to happen. In fact, one of the instructors that's still with the program, because remember, I talked with you, we had multiple parent meetings about this. When we were in Oklahoma, we did a Zoom with parents here because it was important that we have a conversation with the parents. And then when we got back from Oklahoma, we had 2 more parent meetings. And in those parent meetings, and we met with staff repeatedly, and one of the staff members came up to me and he said, Dr. Wilson, it seems kind of like this is what happened. The inmates got a hold of the asylum and the warden let it happen. And I think that in there is probably a descriptor, maybe not the most appropriate, but probably a descriptor that speaks to this issue. I think the individuals in the program now aren't going to be the kind that will want to take advantage of the program. And I think those that are monitoring the program will monitor it the way it needs to be monitored.
And so for clarification, since I wasn't here in the previous semester or for any of the parent meetings, just making sure the warden in that analogy is no longer the warden of, because I know you took over since it sounds like November or whenever these personnel changes occurred. Is that person still within the organization?
Yes.
In a different role?
Yes.
And how are we ensuring that similar oversights won't occur in that?
I think that, well, there's 2 individuals. I think one of the individuals that is in a similar role is in a similar role that they themselves have had experience in and success in. This was a role that was a bit different to them, and I think that their approach to that role was not conducive to the role. And so I think having her in a different position, using the skill sets that she has, I think is advantageous. The individual, to Ms. Boggs's point, that was supervised the program before, so not, we had Dr. Doolin that finished the year, we have an individual that started the year, but we had individuals the year prior. That individual has moved out of directly supervising instructors and into a different role in which some of their skill sets, like grants management, that they had done previously, can be utilized.
Any more comments? So I asked for information about this because of the parent that came up. You say my name and it's game on. I'm digging in. So I did. I talked to these teachers, I talked to students, and because, I'll tell you the reason why, I was a teacher here. Dr. Doolin was a supervisor here at the same time. Under the former leadership, if you didn't do what that superintendent said, you were out. As a supervisor, Dr. Doolin was asked to change teacher evaluations of students, of teachers that she wasn't in charge of, and she refused because she's not going to do that, it's not how she works. She knew that she was going to be on the chopping block for that, and she was, and she resigned, and she did that knowing that that was the right thing to do, okay? I was a teacher here, same kind of thing happened to me. The superintendent, her sister was the principal here. And when I didn't follow orders that were unethical, I overheard a conversation where the superintendent's sister said, Boggs is out of here, knowing that The sister's a superintendent, we had no HR, there was no call to the public for this district, no recordings of anything. I walked in and confronted them and let them know that I overheard their conversation. Turned into a lawsuit, I had to hire an attorney. We were ignored. My students, lies were told, they brought other students in that weren't mine. Those students got free summer school because they were willing to come in to one board meeting where the superintendent allowed them to speak. Fake charges against me, it was a disaster. So, when someone comes up here and addresses me, the reason I ran for this position was to be the voice that I needed as a teacher here. So, I felt like I needed to reach out to these teachers and to the students to make sure that we were getting the full story. I got this schedule, was emailed to me, and then I wanted to know, here's the schedule, and then I got the time cards, didn't match. So I also asked for email communication. A lot of the email communication was falling on blame on Dr. Doolin. And I knew that that did not follow suit to the person that she is, and the person I know she is. She's not going to go after somebody with ill intent. So, my issue is all of these years, the years before, Rhonda steps in and starts questioning stuff. Now she's the bad guy. I am glad to know that the person who was over them, who was not doing the job that caused this problem, that has fallen on Rhonda Doolin's shoulders unfairly, is no longer overseeing any of these programs. And I hope that that person is never in charge, because that showed weak leadership. That's all I'm going to say. She should have stepped up, taken responsibility, instead of letting it fall on other people's shoulders. Doolin came in, cleaned it up, and now she's the bad guy. Those people should never, ever have been able to go after Rhonda, because the leader before wasn't holding them accountable. Accountability is very hard when you haven't been made to be accountable. So, anyway, I just wanted to let you guys know that. That's why I pursued and moved into all of the discussion with the teacher, with the students, and I asked for this presentation so that you guys could know, and anybody watching, any parent, anybody from that fire science program, I wanted to clarify and make sure everybody knows that it is not Dr. Doolin's fault that grown-ups could not come in here and do the job that they were supposed to for students. We're here for students. Apparently, that wasn't the case.
So, Madam President, I don't disagree with most of what you said. I think that there is, I think, fairness to say that the individual that oversaw the program for a number of years was the lack of supervision potentially occurred for a long period of time. Then we had a new individual that came on board this year. And that individual then was replaced by Dr. Doolin mid-term. And I do agree that Dr. Doolin took the brunt of a lot of what.
She took a huge brunt according to the email communication.
Correct, but I also think that there's another individual that has responsibility as well. Not just the individual you're speaking about, but the individual that started off being in charge of the program this year. I've said before, you can do the right thing, you can have the right idea, but implement it the wrong way.
Correct.
And I think there was some of that happened as well. So I think historically, there were some challenges, but I think even this year, there was choices made by individuals that were not Dr. Doolin or not the individual that was responsible for the program for a number of years that didn't help the situation either. And I think that's why Dr. Doolin, when she stepped in, had a heavy load to carry, because not only was it the baggage from years past, but it was also the situation that had festered this year as well.
And just so you guys know, the students loved those teachers. And that's where it's unfortunate, because the lack of accountability, if these people had had guidance and some accountability and knew what the expectations were, they would still be here for students who loved them. But because they didn't, and then they wanted their way and not to follow the new structure, right? Because isn't there safety in structure? I think we heard that,
Yeah,
right?
heard that, yeah.
Then the students would still have these great teachers. So accountability is huge.
So unless there's any other questions or concerns, that is the information and discussion on the fire science schedule and hours.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. 12, staff reports, superintendent summary of current events.
Yes, Madam President, members of the governing board, just a couple things for you. One, as you are aware, we're in the midst of remodeling this campus. Chase has done a wonderful job with the remodel and their schedule. We're currently in, I believe, building 6, 7, and 9, which is the automotive industrial trades areas, with the expectation of the vast majority of those buildings being able to be moved into by the latter part of June, first part of July, which we're grateful for, because obviously we have a bit of an earlier start date this year. And so Chase is working really hard to get those buildings done, and our maintenance crew is working, and custodial crew is working really hard to orchestrate some of the movements that have to happen once those buildings are completed. Our enrollment is currently forecasting at being about a 20% increase over the year prior. Now, we know that those numbers oftentimes don't materialize in the fall just for the nature of how things work. But optimistically, if even if it's a half of that, that's a 10% increase, and an increase that, we haven't seen and schools typically don't see. So I think that speaks to the product that we have and the environment that we're creating. Conference, just a reminder, those of you that are going down to the summer conference in Tucson, I believe that's the middle part of July. It's a great opportunity for EVIT to participate with other CTEDs across the state and help develop capacity for CTEDs, not just our own, but others. HVAC, if you know anybody that wants to teach HVAC, please, that is a hard position to fill. And you go back to some of the discussions about, turnover. We've talked before about the retention of staff and the turnover of staff, and over the last 7 years, we've tracked it over the last 7 years, and we've had turnover in the 30s. We've had turnover in the percentage, the teens. On average, year over year, we have about a 28% turnover rate as an organization. This year, we're at about 27%. And so when, sometimes I think people think, oh my gosh, we're on what is on average for us as an organization. That doesn't mean we don't have room to improve. We certainly do. But I think sometimes there's a misnomer that we have turnover that's excessive, when in comparison to what happens in most years, it's about average. But the reason why I bring that up with HVAC is that oftentimes we will have a position that's hard to fill, and we will find somebody, and we'll just be so grateful that we found somebody, that we really don't necessarily have the right person. And so that doesn't work out, and so it just dominoes itself. So my whole spiel on that is, if you know anybody that wants to teach HVAC, please. Then last, most certainly not least, I'd like to thank Tammy. As you guys realize that with Culinary Down, our meals and our snacks are no longer provided, but she's taken it upon herself to make sure that you all have a little sustenance in you for nights that you're here. So Tammy, thank you very much for doing that.
Yeah.
So outside of that, that's all I have, Madam President.
All right.
We like Tammy treats.
Yes, very nice. We're hungry when we get here. 13, closing items, calendar.
Before we get to that, I'd like to maybe have the record reflect that Mr. Covington has made a move. He's moving closer to the center of power. He came in, told me to get out of his seat.
Hey, all I did was follow the name tag.
He said, me and Mr.
He doesn't know,
Watkins have been hanging out, but he's moving closer to the center of power.
he doesn't realize his name tag is there, and mine was here.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
You gotta learn to read your name.
Entertainment. All
Madam
right.
President, the only request I have is on the 26th, if folks could give thought to meeting, because, you know, this is, the 26th will probably be the last time that we'll be in this room, so, you know, where you want to go. And then, I think that's about it.
Oh, yeah, bring me your policy feedback.
Unlikely I'll be here on the 26th.
Unlikely.
I will also be gone out of town on the 26th, and I believe Ms.
Amber will be
McAfee
as
will
well.
also be gone on the 26th.
I will also be gone on the 26th.
Two, three, four.
Maybe we need to.
I'll be zooming in from,
So 1, 2,
I could
3.
probably participate remotely.
Yeah, I could Zoom if needed as well.
We probably.
Oh, shoot, I don't actually, I might be
We would
on
probably
my-
call in. I don't know if we can
Let's see
zoom
if
in.
let's do some work and see if we can't get some, because I'd hate for folks if they're out of town or whatever to have to do. But if we could get a quorum, if not, then we may have to reach back to some who aren't here and see if they can't participate.
I'm not leaving town.
I know, I just would rather you not have to. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay, B, adjournment.
I so move, we get out of here.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Do you want this back?
Nobody in their right mind. All right, we are adjourned.